So I came across an article on Colts Wire earlier this week. You familiar with Colts Wire? Now, the reality of the situation is that if you are a Colts fan, whether you know it or not, the answer to that question is yes. If you're reading things about this team, of course, it's very, very likely that whether or not you check the URL or the logo on the page, that you are on Colts Wire reading about the Colts. Regardless, I only bring that up to preface the fact that as I talk about the list of best remaining free agents available for the Colts, I am referring to their list. This is not my list. I'm not that talented. I'm not the news guy. I'm the discussion guy. Other people find the news. They find the free agents. I kind of just talk about it. I'm kind of a ground level, just like some idiot fan, like the average one of us, right? So they had made a list of 10 remaining free agents that can still help out the Colts going into the season. I don't know if that was the exact title, but I'm paraphrasing here. Now, I may or may not mention a couple of the names, or rather, I will be mentioning just about every name in that list, but I might be mentioning some names outside of that list as well. But for the most part, I'm going to be deferring to the work that they did, bringing you the list if you have not seen it yourself, and then speaking to it myself a little bit, putting my flair on the list a little bit, right? So I'll be giving my opinions on the players that Colts Wire mentioned on that list, and then also kind of speaking to the position groups and how they would fit into the Colts, right? Yada, yada, yada. You get the idea, right? So I dropped the article in the description of this video if you're looking to read it yourself, or you want to follow along, or you're not enjoying me talking, you just want to shut the video off and go read it and just be done with it. Yeah, that's that. So we'll get right into it. But before we do, quickly just want to introduce myself. For those of you who come here often, you already know my name is Justin. This is the Ride the Bench Colts cast. I record in my bedroom. I will literally say that every video until the end of time. You already know that the one thing I ask of anybody that comes here and is enjoying the video is that you just shoot the video a like. Very, very simple. It's going to help me get out to as many people as humanly possible, as well as let me know where I need to improve. Is this the type of video you want in front of your face, right? So on and so forth. So I ask of that. Of course, if you want to subscribe, I'd be incredibly grateful. I would like you to subscribe. But ultimately, I'm going to be here talking about the Colts for such a long time, years and years, centuries, right? That, it is what it is. If you don't subscribe now, you'll be seeing plenty more of me in the future. Maybe I will get you down the line. But again, if you haven't subscribed yet and you're here often, totally go ahead and do that. It's going to let me know that I'm doing the right thing, right? So without further ado, let's get into it. So as opposed to doing this in the form of like an actual list, right? Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I kind of just broke this down into the position groups that the players mentioned on the list were a part of, and then I'll mention the players and talk about the position group, whatever, right? I said that at the top of the show. Hopefully that's making a little bit of sense. So one of the positions that we're going to be looking at here is the offensive guard position. Now, obviously, talking about free agents, additions to the offensive line, particularly at that right guard spot, guard. That's what happens when you're talking, right? Every now and then a word comes out weird. It makes a ton of sense, right? And despite the Colts offensive line performing better towards the end of the season, really in that second half of the season, and as it went on, and that includes Will Fries at right guard, it does speak to the level of talent you have available at that position when the fan base is getting excited over an undrafted rookie at the position, right? And you look at the roster as it currently stands, and we only have but so many guards, right? Other than Will Fries, we're obviously looking at Danny Pinter, which isn't the most exciting thing in the world. And I've got no problems with Danny Pinter personally, of course. I'm certainly not trying to take anyone's job from them. But he hasn't exactly shown Colts fans that he's like a bruiser out there on the offensive line, right? So we feel like we would need improvement there. We have Quentin Nelson and Will Fries, who are our starters as it currently stands. Quentin Nelson, obviously a starter for as long as he's on the roster. Will Fries is the starter right now. Now, other than them, it's essentially practice squad guys, right? Or presumably so. You obviously have the undrafted kid out of Alabama, whose name I'm still unable to pronounce. And then you have a guy by the name of Arlington Hambright, who I've only become aware of for the sake of this video. So at this juncture, before we're even cut down to 53 men on the roster, we only have 5 guards on the roster. So obviously, if for nothing else, this room has a glaring need for some bodies to compete, but maybe even ones that could start if they had to, right? So the Colts Wire had mentioned Dalton Risner from Denver and Gabe Jackson from, I don't remember the last place he played. He's a veteran, right? Now, Dalton Risner from me. This is a guy that was a second-round pick in the year 2019 for Denver, and since then was literally starting for them the entire time. He's 27 years old, and has only missed, I think, 4 games in his career. I'd have to double-check that, but I believe it's 4 games from what I was reading earlier. Now, all of these facts that I just mentioned do kind of beg the question, what the hell is Dalton Risner even doing out there in free agency still, right? I mean, there's got to be some sort of layer to this and his availability that I'm currently unaware of, because his credentials speak for itself, right? He's clearly worthy of a job anywhere, let alone the Colts and all of our uninspiring options at the right guard position, right? So the fact that we don't have him on the roster now, even with him still available, we're not even hearing grumblings or mumblings, or we're not hearing anything about Dalton Risner coming to the Colts. That tells me that Chris Ballard is going to roll with Will Fries going into the season, and we'll see how that goes. Maybe it'll be good, maybe it'll be bad. Now, I don't want to prematurely write the story here, but this is a case much like last season where we went in with Matt Pryor as our starting left tackle, as our only established option. Obviously, Raymond came on nice as the season went on. But you're kind of looking at this position in right guard saying, man, if this one blows up in our face, we can look at this position as one that pretty obviously needed to be addressed in the offseason, and in essence was like ignored, right? So back to the guys mentioned by Colts Wire, even Gabe Jackson, who doesn't quite at this juncture maybe have the expectation to start that a Dalton Risner would come in here, provide us a nice veteran and a nice piece of depth, right? Kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, and ultimately would make me personally feel a little bit better about where we're at on the offensive line, particularly at that right guard position. So now that's the offensive guard position. Another thing that was mentioned by Colts Wire was the wide receiver room, and specifically good old DeAndre Hopkins, the cover boy of the video, right? You see the big X on him. And so as far as for some reason it must be done. The article mentioned DeAndre Hopkins. Now, I avoided, when DeAndre Hopkins was released, making an entire video about it because I don't really feel like it's Colts news, but I'll give my opinion here, right? Let's see. You ever have that one friend, gets no pussy, by the way, and you guys are having a drink or whatever, you're hanging out, and he asks, bro, one night only, right? Just one night. If you could choose between Megan Fox and Jessica Alba, just one night, bro, just one night, which one would it be? Now, some people love that type of conversation. They eat it up, right? Like Zeke with the spoon, with the cereal. But for me, it's like, bro, I'm getting rejected by 6s at the local bar over here, and you're out here talking about me choosing between Megan Fox and Jessica Alba, right? It's pointless. Let's talk about something more productive, right? I mean, Megan Fox is open about her preferences, right? Yeah, nothing I say here is going to make Megan Fox take her clothes off. She's doing that for Machine Gun Kelly, which I suppose in this case, Machine Gun Kelly, I guess, is Patrick Mahomes. So you see where this analogy starts to fall apart, but you follow where I'm going with this, right? You see how this is kind of like, what's the point? Right? DeAndre Hopkins is not coming to the Colts. He's open about what he wants to do. The Colts don't fit the bill. He wants to play for a team that's competing with a quarterback. I mean, he mentioned like some of the best teams in football, and here's Colts fans talking about DeAndre Hopkins coming here. Now, of course, would I like DeAndre Hopkins in Indianapolis? Duh. Do I think he'd provide us with a lot? Yes, of course, adding a piece of his caliber, people just think about the contract and competing now, but there's something to be said about having him as a veteran leader, not only in the wide receiver room, but for a young quarterback. Nice to have a guy who's been there, done that, played with quarterbacks who were pretty good, some a lot more that were really not very good. DeAndre Hopkins would help the Colts. We get this, right? But he's not coming here. Discussion over. So we look at our receiver room, though, right? And we like that room. Young, promising guys that we actually think are fit for the bill, right? Are going to do what needs to be done. But we are an injury or two away from things looking a lot more bleak. So I do understand the desire of talking about adding a receiver. But again, let's just be a little bit more realistic here, right? Forget Megan Fox. Forget Jessica Alba. We got no chance, all right? So the latest piece of information floating around, maybe by the time I release this, he'll already be signed, is that we're going to be getting Brashard Perriman is that guy. And again, I'd be lying if I said that Brashard Perriman makes me as excited as a Megan Fox or Jessica Alba, right? But we're going to have to learn to like it, Beggars can't be choosers, right? That's what they say. So I'd far prefer names like maybe Jarvis Landry, despite the fact that he's a slot specialist and we had drafted Downs, we had signed McKenzie. So we kind of have that role filled. I still think Jarvis Landry would be an awesome addition to this room at a cheap enough price. Rashard Higgins out there, formerly of the Browns. He played for Carolina most recently. I've always liked Rashard Higgins. Would love to see him be a part of that. Now, my air conditioner just went on. I'm hoping that the microphone isn't picking that up, but if it is, I apologize for the miserable sound quality that you're about to hear, or maybe you're not hearing it at all and I'm just talking to myself. But point being is that I apologize if this video becomes unwatchable, and that is what it is. So there it is, the wide receiver room. Linebacker, now Jalen Smith, Rashaan Evans, Quan Alexander. These were the guys mentioned by Colts Wire. I love all of these options. Solid, versatile, veteran linebackers, right? You know, the Colts, Chris Ballard, Jim Irsay, Shane, whoever you want to call it, right? We really took a bet on Shaquille Leonard's health by letting Bobby Okereke walk and sign with the Giants in the offseason. I didn't hate the move. I understood why that happened, you know? And the starting unit does look strong as is, right? If Shaq Leonard can come back, we have him. We have Zaire Franklin, who's on the cusp of getting some serious national attention this season, in my opinion. And then you have EJ Speed, who I cannot be any more confident in as far as a guy who's going to come in and be able to produce and fill the shoes to some degree, if not entirely, of a Bobby Okereke, right? But if we look at the guys behind them, I'm kind of at a loss with some of these names, and I'm not even going to name them because I don't want to insult them, but I've never heard of most any of these guys. And the depth that we have, or really the lack thereof, the point being is we're used to being a little bit deeper at linebacker under Chris Ballard. Now, we could simply just sit here and trust Chris Ballard and his scouting abilities and his roster building abilities and so on and so forth. And that's fine. Maybe some people are going to take that route. I tend to take that route very often. I mean, after all, you don't really know someone can play until you see them play, right? A couple years ago, EJ Speed wasn't the most exciting name, but how that type of thing can change. Here we are, he's starting for us. No one is batting an eye, right? So it's possible that one of these guys behind some of the dudes that we have steps up, but I'm not in the business of counting anybody out, right? I suppose that's what I'm trying to say. But the idea of guys like Jalen Smith, Quan Alexander, Rashaan Evans, hopping on as veterans, right, who knows what it takes to be starters in this league, to play in this league, this would be great for us. And I think it would just be an iron sharpens iron type of situation. So Colts Wire with you there. Great ideas on the linebacker additions. Now we go to corner, the cornerback room. Now this right here is a position that I have expressed a little bit of concern in, right? We traded Stephon Gilmore to the Cowboys for a fifth-round pick. Did we get Darius Rush with that pick, by the way? Someone let me know. And that's one that made a lot of sense to me, right? Obviously, Stephon Gilmore's like a win-now piece. The Colts may be closer than some people think, but certainly not in any danger of making the Super Bowl this season, right? Can we at least acknowledge that? And then you got rid of him in a secondary that was already inconsistent. You bring in Juju Brents. You bring in Darius Rush. You bring in Jalen Jones, I believe is his name, the 7th-round pick, the 6th-round pick. So we infused the room with some youth, but I feel other than Kenny Moore, we're lacking a little bit of that veteran presence. Not to say that Isaiah Rodgers hasn't been there, done that, but what, this is his 3rd season? I love Isaiah Rodgers. I think he might be the most underrated player on this team today, but, you know, if this is your only veteran outside of Kenny Moore, my point is that you could use a little bit more here, right? So the names brought up by Colts Wire were Marcus Peters, Ronald Darby, Casey Hayward. Love all of these options, and there's a reason for that, right? These aren't like Jalen Ramsey type guys that are going to come in, they're locked down, and they're just going to change the entire team. But they're veterans who are good, have been great, but are kind of at a point in their career where maybe they'd be willing to accept the idea of being on a team like the Colts that's kind of building towards something and maybe end up sniffing a wild card. But nonetheless, you get to play more football. You get to have a paycheck. You get to have the purpose of bringing up a young room and kind of helping them out. I really like the idea of Marcus Peters, Ronald Darby, and Casey Hayward. Marcus Peters would be crazy cool, right? Because can you imagine him chomping at the bit? Maybe he wouldn't be talking as much. I feel like Marcus Peters is the type of guy that talks and talks and talks, but he's always on like a great team. Maybe if he was on the Colts, he wouldn't be doing. Casey Hayward, though, quiet guy, played for the Chargers, I believe the Packers. I'm sure the Raiders, I think, are in there. I like these additions. I think they would give us a little more insurance because right now we're really, really relying. I mean, Juju Brents, we're one guy away, and Juju Brents not stepping up to the plate. of us having a major problem here. Potentially, a lot of people liking what they're seeing out of Darius Rush in OTAs. Again, Juju Brents hasn't been practicing, so we don't technically know with him. But Darius Rush is the type of guy. Kent Sterling, for those of you who watch him, is actually at OTA saying Darius Rush is just one of those guys that's just moving around different, just flying off, not the screen, but in person, is the type of guy that's popping right now. But again, any of these veteran corners would do great for me. So I think Adrian Amos was on the list as well. Looks like the Colts kind of like what they have at safety. They just moved Julian Blackmon over, figuring that leaves Rodney Thomas for the opening spot. But an Adrian Amos would be nice. But at the same time, I don't know. For me, I feel like I kind of want to stick with the starters we have at safety. And if we add pieces, I would rather me have not heard of them before, and they kind of fill in behind the young guys that we have. So for me, that is that. I think I just did the entire episode on the best remaining free agents. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you made it this far, you couldn't have hated it that much. This is where you shoot the like. This is where you subscribe. If you've done both of those things, you're still looking for a way to help me out. 1, I appreciate you. 2, you go ahead and share it with a friend. Now, I understand that is a ginormous ask for you to just be talking to someone. You're making a friend, and then you tell them about this, and they're like, why is he telling me about this little Colts podcast? But, yeah, that's about it. So until next time, my name is Justin. This was the Ride and Bench Colts cast. You've listened to all of it. Go Colts.